So in the last video, I showed you exactly how I'd assess a real life property for privacy issues and function. In this video, I want to take that same example and go further. So we're going to go through all of the items on the wish list, and I'm going to show you how I would implement them. I'm not using any fancy programs. I'm just drawing on my iPad and just talking you through all the steps as I go. If you haven't watched the privacy video yet, you don't need to watch that before you see this one, but I do recommend you check that one out too after you're done with this one. So let's just get right into it because it's going to be really fun. Okay, so we're taking a look at this real life property, and this is a photo that was taken from the inside of the home looking down on the property. We also have another picture here of the upper deck area, and in the last video I showed you different ways that we were addressing privacy. So privacy is always number one on my list, no matter what the client's list is. So I always put this, I create a wish list, I have the client create a wish list. On the very top is privacy, hiding ugly views, and in this situation there are no views to keep, but if there were particular views that were really nice that they wanted to leave open, like, oh, I really enjoy looking at the tree that is in my neighbor's property, or I really like the view of the mountains from like the west side of the house, you would also make notes of those things. And after that, I kind of go through and come up with a wish list, and from there, I'll actually take that wish list and sort of make it into an order, a number order of how important these things are. So first was privacy and hiding those ugly views. The second we came up with was the utility area or some kind of storage for outdoor items. Third was a water feature, really interested in a water feature focal point. The fourth was a dining area, kind of secluded, a nice area to eat outside. Another one was sort of a lounge space to relax with friends, maybe a fire pit or something like that. Another important thing was definitely kids play area. I mean, this could probably bump up the list. If you do have young children, you're going to obviously need to keep play areas open for those children. Would be nice vegetable garden, and would be nice garden beds and beauty. And I know this is number 8 is probably on the top of a lot of your lists, but I'd encourage you to sort of really think about that. Like, obviously we're going to include garden beds. Obviously we're going to try to make it beautiful. So it's sort of like this is going to happen no matter what, but the more important things about designing a landscape are the things up here. Like, I really need privacy, I really need storage, I really want to eat outside, I really want this water feature. That might not be on the top of your list, but for this particular project, we're going to go with the water feature being really important. So now we have this property here, and I just want to show you how I would start to lay some of this stuff out. So in a situation like this, where you have a long and narrow backyard, so the backyard is all very long and narrow. There's a little jut out here, and then there's sort of a walkout, say right here from the downstairs. So if you have a long and narrow space like this, the tendency that I see a lot of people have is to create garden beds along the left and right sides, and really all this does is make it feel a lot more narrow and a lot more constrained. So this is kind of pushing this in, and it's emphasizing the fact that this is pretty narrow, that this is a pretty narrow property. So we don't really want to do that. In this type of property, what I would do is I would almost take this outside area that we're working with, right? I think it kind of to right here. And we have the walk-in. I would try to divide it into like different spaces horizontally. So now, instead of a very narrow yard, we have this huge space here that's almost a square, like from here all the way around. And then we have another one that's kind of almost like a rectangular space, and another one here. And it really breaks up the property in a nice way. It makes it feel more expansive, wider, and easier to kind of wrap your head around. So if you're dealing with a really long, narrow space, try cutting it into 2 or 3 blocks along the way. So now that we have that figured out, I'm going to kind of try to go with that as I'm designing here. And we don't want to forget about the privacy and hiding the ugly views. So obviously we have the ugly view here that we need to get rid of. And then we have neighbor issues over here where they even have this upper deck and it's kind of looking down. So the first thing that I would probably suggest to hide this area and this telephone pole is maybe some kind of feature tree. Actually, let me like reduce the opacity just a little bit so it's easier to see what I'm drawing on here. So if we had a larger tree in this area, again, very sloppy, very messy. You don't have to be an artist to come up with stuff like this. You just have to think about function and form and how you want the space to actually function. So if you did a very large shade tree in that particular area, I think you would be in a really good position to block out the majority of this garage here. And the other thing that we're probably going to need, like we talked earlier about doing this deck up here with some kind of lattice or something, so that's already in the works. And from down here, we're going to need probably a little bit of privacy tree or screening in this area here because of the neighbors. And that's still, because they're above, it's still not going to handle everything for them because their dining area is here. People from up here are going to watch them eating. So we kind of have to work on the privacy situation and all of that too. We also need some kind of screening for this back area where it's kind of ugly, potentially. So we're just coming up with like some ideas now here and trying to work things out. So one of the big things on their list was utility area. So I want to put in a utility area for them, and I think in this back area here would be a perfect area for potentially utility area and something more. So let's just say we're going to do a shed in this particular area back here to store some of their things, and we still have some space to play with here. But what if this whole thing was actually fenced off from the rest of the property? So we have a little bit of a fence here, and we just have sort of a separate area, so they would go in to this area through a gate or something like that. So that would give them the storage they need and also kind of hide that area. The next thing they want, like water feature, focal points of some kind. So in order to determine that, usually I'll do that near the end because I want to make sure I'm strategically placing them. So a lot of times I'll put a focal point at the end of the path. So let's just say that there's the walkout here, and they do have to get up to here somehow. So we're going to have a path that's going maybe this way, and then maybe from here we're going to kind of jut over and then have the walkway turn like that. And this can change. This is just me kind of trying to come up with an idea here. If that's the case, then we would have a focal point that could go right here. So we'll put like a little circle there for the focal point in that situation. And maybe we'll move this up a little bit more and we'll work around with that. So next we have to figure out how to seclude the dining area. So they have the dining area here, and that's all well and fine, but maybe we need to kind of move it a little bit more into this area here. So what if we had this area here that is almost like below the deck or next to the deck but down? It's a little bit hard to see here because of the deck is in the way, but they do have the space down there. And then what I would also have to do at that point, because we have the neighbors, is come up with some kind of screening here to screen this dining area off from other things. Okay, so the next thing on the list was a lounge space, and I think a lounge space would make a whole lot of sense here in this area here, right when you walk out of the back walk. So maybe we have the dining area and then we have this lounge space kind of right next to each other on the property. And they also need the kids' play area. So right now the kids' play area is right in this area where I put the trampoline is right where I put the focal point. So what if it moved to over here where this little house is, and then we just had a big kind of like a lawn space for the kids here, and this is kind of play. So we're going down that list again. And another would be nice would be a vegetable garden. So you have a couple options there depending on the aspect or which direction the property's facing. For vegetable garden, you would want a lot of sun. So we'd have to find a full sun area. So vegetables could either be like in this area potentially, or maybe they could even go in this back area where the utility area is, because that would make a lot of sense if there was like a shed here and then they could do a little greenhouse or something, or just have a place to kind of care for these plants. So either over here or back there. And then obviously the garden beds and the beauty of the whole thing will come after. So what I like to do with garden beds and stuff is I sort of design it after I get all of like the main things in. So we have this dining area and this lounge area here, and then we have the play area. So all along here we could potentially have garden beds. And I just have this whole area here. We have this whole area all along here that we could put garden beds. So you can always be able to fit those garden beds in as you design. You could even have some here so they walk out, and then they have some nice plants right when you walk out, or maybe these are some herbs that you could use for eating. And then you would need some sort of path for them to get from there to there. But this whole area could be plants as well, and then all along here. And again, if you do have areas with wind, you want to make sure that you're blocking the wind, trying to reduce that sound, reduce the road noise, things like that. And we do have some bigger sort of privacy trees going in this area too. But these could be almost like mixed borders with different plants along with those, maybe arborvitae or something like that. So I just wanted to take you through that process. Look how messy and sketchy and ridiculous this looks, but this is sort of the process. I don't think you need to be an artist. I think you just need to come up with a wish list, and then you need to go down that wish list and start drawing. And for some clients, I will actually take something like this. I'll do it 10, even 20 times sometimes with just bubble drawings and just putting little circles in and trying to make everything fit, sort of like an Etch-a-Sketch or a lounge. Here I have another picture that's a little bit more drawn out for this situation, where we have the shed in the back with the vegetable gardens. We have the play area here. We have that focal point. Here's the lawn. We're hiding this view, remember? We're blocking the neighbors here. We got the lounge. We got the dining. We got the fire pit. So we had everything in. We're blocking the road noise, we're blocking the wind. We made considerations for all of that. And from here on out, you're ready to start planning, picking the features, picking what everything's going to look like, picking all your plants and sort of laying out the garden beds. I have a course for that. I have lots of books about different parts of this process. Again, Plant Perfect activity book. I have a book about focal points, all that stuff I'll leave links to in the description below. And I hope this was helpful just to see like a real life example of how you could lay out a property in a very simple but messy way and just sort of play around with that. If drawing over the photo isn't helpful to you, like I did for this, you could also just draw it on a flat piece of paper like I did here and just draw it to scale, like measure everything, get the right dimensions out, and then you can start drawing everything into scale. On the left-hand side of the screen, I just have a modified version of what's going on in this landscape. And then on the right-hand side, I'm drawing a scale plan, starting to lay out the different positioning of the dining area, the lounge space, the lawn, and I'm making little notes to myself about the wind and the road noise. So here you can see I'm doing the garden beds, and I'm starting to draw out some of the furniture even for the dining area, just to get a feel for how everything is going to look together and where the paths are going to go. And now I just sort of eliminated all of the noise so I could draw in where the plants would go. So now I'm kind of developing a planting plan, not choosing specific plants, but where the plants will go. And you can see I got my water feature in there now next to the lounge space and the fire pit area. And I have a little area for the children to play. I'm starting to add some textures. I want to use brick or different kinds of stone. And here I'm doing little dots for grasses and things like that. So I'm really just trying to bring this design to life so that if a client looks at it, they can kind of understand what I'm thinking for the design. And this is how I would take that really messy drawing and clean it up a little bit, make some notes, and then actually turn it into a real landscape design project. And if you liked this video and you want a bit more guidance as to how you can really do this yourself, I have an entire book. It's called the Plant Perfect activity book, and it takes you through all different activities and exercises so that you can create a functional space that is planned for peace and privacy and complements your style and beautifies your neighborhood. So if you're interested in that Plant Perfect activity book, I'm going to leave the link to that in the description below so you can grab your copy today. And I'll see you over in the next video.